Oh, made some more machinery shop related purchases. But before I show you what I picked up last weekend, I want to talk real quick about an online auction that I went to. It wasn't an online auction. It was an on-site auction, but they were also doing it concurrently online, and they were also taking phone bids. It was a machine shop. It was a bank-ordered sale of a machine shop out in western Massachusetts. It took me over an hour to drive out there. And the reality is, I really wished I had never gone. And it wasn't because there weren't deals to be had there. It's because I was not financially prepared to cash in on the deals. The problem was not that I couldn't get some stuff. The problem was that you had to bid against these resellers that were there, and a lot of the lots just contained so much stuff. I'll give you for example. There were two large shelving units up against the wall, and they sold everything on the shelving units, including the stuff that was on the floor right near the shelving units, and that ended up going for $250. It probably would have went higher if there was another bidder there to bid against the guy. He was probably prepared to go for more, because I ended up talking to him after he bought the stuff, and he said he's a reseller, so he'd be willing to sell the stuff to me right there. But you know, we had a clear understanding with each other that he wasn't going to sell me the stuff cheap just because I watched him buy it cheap. He was going to sell it to me based on what he knew he could get for it online, and a little less because it's more convenient for him to sell it to me right there. So there must have been 6 or 8 boring heads. Some of them were Criterion, some of them were other brands. There were drill indexes, metal boxes with the drawers that were clearly marked for the drill sizes. You know, you opened up a drawer or two, and some of the drawers had like hardly any drills in them, and then you'd open up another one and it'd be full of new drill bits. There was a wooden box there that had large Morse taper twist drills. Every drill in there looked like it was a minimum 1 inch, and the largest one I pulled out looked like a 2-inch drill. And you know, it had been reground, but it was still usable. And there was probably, I'd say, maybe 12 to 15 of those large twist drill bits. End mills, boxes. I mean, like a box, like you know, like a box maybe this size. There must have been maybe 6 or 8 boxes chucked filled with end mills. All high-speed steel, but a lot of them were in the plastic containers. A lot of them looked like they were either recently sharpened or had never been used. And then, you know, a lot of used ones, but that still looked usable. There was a rotary table, probably about a 12-inch rotary table on the bottom shelf. Had surface rust all over from being so low and close to the ground. Looked like they hadn't been using it in a while. There was an angled, there was a like an angle plate that you could tilt like this. Not sure of the manufacturer on that one. The guy got a steal at $250, and I begged off because I didn't want to spend a bunch of money on all of that stuff, knowing that I'd have to turn around and resell a lot of it, because there's no way I'm going to use that many boring heads, even though it'd be nice to have some, you know, there were some small ones and larger ones. But the point is, this was a big shop, and they had enough boring. They must have taken every boring head in the shop and put it on one shelf. You know, tables, a lot of workbenches, like my workbench here, covered with tooling. They basically sold the table and whatever was on top of the table. Some of the tables went for $50. Some of them went for more money. You know, there was one table that had some tooling on it, had a Collins surface plate on the end there, big heavy thing, and that was basically, they were selling that and then everything on the table. Guy ended up getting that for, I think, $250, or no, that was he got that pretty cheap. He might have gotten that table for only like $50, and I said, you know, you want to sell anything off the table? The one purchase I made there was actually off of this guy who had already bought. I didn't buy one item through the auction. And about noontime, the auction was about half over. I left, gave up. Didn't even get to the inspection room where all the measuring devices were. And I went online and checked the prices later, and it turns out I'm glad I didn't stick around, because everything in the measuring room, inspection room I should say, went for, you know, pretty serious money, and probably still a great deal, because I mean there was like a Mitutoyo height gauge that was like 3 feet tall, and and all kinds of stuff in there, specialized stuff. There was a big wooden case that had a full set of Fowler micrometers in there. Went for $275. The mics and the standards, like starting from like maybe like 1 to 3 inch, maybe all the way up to like a 12 inch or something. There were some deals there, definitely. So I got this end mill holder with this solid carbide 5-flute roughing mill in it for $20. And it's marked R8EM, which means this is the R8 shank, EM for end mill, 100306. Which I googled that, and first thing that came up was Kennametal, but I think they also use that same number as a nomenclature number for other brands too. I can't find any marking on it to see who makes it, so it might be just a cheapo. I don't know. But for $20, I didn't get a huge steal on the end mill holder if it's a cheapo, but I think with the addition of the solid carbide roughing mill, I think I did okay. So I'm going to add that to the collection of my end mill holders. So get this, guys. So there were a lot of CNC milling machines there, Bridgeports with CNC Prototrack on them, and that went for several $1,000s a piece. Guys who were buying those probably figured that they were getting good deals on them. They got to a manual Bridgeport. They sold a manual Bridgeport there in running condition. Sure, it was old. I think it brought $400 or some ridiculously low price. Then they got to the other manual mill that they had sitting in the corner. Wouldn't you know it? A Wells Index. It was a model, I think a 745 or a 747 Wells Index. I forget the exact model number. But I'm looking at this Wells Index and I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I said, I hope that doesn't go too cheap, because I'm going to really be kicking myself, because I think the spindle in that mill will work. Well, the mill was hooked up and running. So I fired it up when I first got there early in the morning. And it had a big grinding wheel. It had an Arbor with a grinding wheel in it. So I'm not sure what operation they were doing. But on the table, they had like a 15... must have been at least a 15 or an 18-inch rotary table bolted down to the table. So some serious money sitting there with the rotary table. So they get to the Wells Index mill, and true to the what you hear about the Wells mills, everybody, oh, it's not a Bridgeport, and it's an old manual mill, so nobody wanted it. So finally, the guy gets down to $200, and there was a guy there who had bought some more expensive mills. He popped it for $200, and then nobody's bidding against him. And they're getting to the going once, going twice, and I'm thinking to myself, this guy's going to buy this mill, this running Wells Index mill, for $200 plus the 15% prize premium, $230 plus tax. So I raised my card, $250. No sooner do I do that, I overhear like one of the guy's partners or whatever, or guys that he came with, one of his buddies say to him, he said, the rotary table alone's worth that. So he goes to $300. So now it's $350 to me. And I'm sitting there and I'm going, here's the problem. That kind of an auction, I can't go there and take that thing apart and load it piece by piece. Auction like that, they put right in the agreement. If you buy any of that equipment there, you have to use a licensed rigging company to move that machine. Even if I just wanted one of them to take that machine out and put it on the back of my 1-ton Dodge pickup truck, I'd still have to pay a professional rigger to do that. And I was over an hour away from home. I didn't have my truck with me. There was no rigger on site that day, meaning they expected you to come back the next day. Had to be out of there by Friday. Okay, this auction was Tuesday. So I just couldn't do it, and so I passed. The guy ended up getting it for $300. It is what it is. Let's see. No, he opened it for $2. I went to $250. He went to $3. Yeah, He got it for $3. For some reason, when I checked it online, it showed that it sold for $250. But no, I was right there. I was there when it happened, so I did see it sell for the $300, and then plus 15%, so $345 plus tax. And he got himself a running Wells Index milling machine with a big rotary table on it. And he probably could turn around and sell that rotary table for at least half the money that he spent on the machine. And I asked him what his intentions were with the mill, in case by some luck he was actually going to use it for parts, but my luck wasn't that good. He actually was buying it for his son, or at least that's what he told me. So the other big steal that I saw there was a Miller 330 AB, I think is the model number. You know, my big old Airco giant TIG welder I got over there in the corner that I thought I got a steal on. As much of a steal as I got on that welder's made by Miller. We already know that, but it's branded as an Airco. Well, the original Miller version of that is the Model 330, I think they call it. They had one of those there. They had one of those there with the argon tank next to it, the whole TIG setup. It was on a welded metal rolling cart. That thing had an online bid of $10, and we're sitting there at the auction. About 15 or 20 of us guys are standing around. They get to the welder. The auctioneer asks if they got a bid, and the assistant auctioneer tells him, he says, yeah, we got an online bid, $10. So he says, all right. So he's looking for, nobody bid on it. Nobody bid on it. Some guy who put a bid in online bought that welder for $10. It was worth more than that in scrap all day long. But again, gotta move it. Me, you know, I'd have to go to divorce court if I came home with another one of those. So that's what happened there. But last weekend on Craigslist, I saw a listing for machine shop and tools, something like that. And I read the ad, and it said that the guy had, you know, a Bridgeport, South Bend lathe, a shear, and a bunch of other stuff, and an Arbor Press. And I had been thinking about an Arbor Press for a while. And the thing was, I kept seeing Arbor Presses pop up every once in a while on Craigslist, and for what I thought was a lot of money. And the thing with Arbor Presses are, you have your Dakes, D-A-K-E, and then you have your Greenard. And the Dake and the Greenard are good, solid, old presses that if you find one and it's not broken and doesn't have any issues, that's a press you could probably have for your entire life. Pass it on to somebody else, and they'll have it for their lifetime. And as long as somebody doesn't get silly and scrap the thing, who knows how many generations a press like that could last you. And then you've got the Famco, I think, and the Phase 2. Those are your cheaper presses. And there's probably some other names I'm not thinking of there, but the Dake and the Green are the ones you want to look for, in my opinion. So what I ended up doing was I contacted the guy, and I said, hey, what do you got for an Arbor Press? And he said, it's a Dake. So I said, all right, I'm interested. So we make plans to get together for me to drive out there and take a look at this thing. He was about 45 minutes away. And something was eerily familiar about this situation. And lo and behold, when I get out there to the address and I meet the guy, turns out this is the guy that I went and looked at his Bridgeport that he had for sale last year around the same time, right when I was making my decision as to whether or not to buy the Wells Index down at the factory that I ended up buying. And of course, we all know how that turned out for me, right? Broken spindle. Or his Bridgeport. Problem with his Bridgeport, it's buried in a garage, it's in pieces, and that's exactly how it was when he took it out of the place that he got it from. They disassemble it to move it out of the place. He moves it down the basement stairs into a house he was living in. He gets a divorce. He has to move it again, moves it out of there, moves it into his father's garage. Tries to unload it last year. I didn't buy it. So here we go. A year later, I go back in there, and they had cleaned the place up some, but for the most part, most of the stuff was still there. So I remembered looking at the Arbor Press when I was there, and I remember you wanted 75 bucks for the Arbor Press, and I remember saying, well, you know, at the time, I don't know why, but I was like, I'd give you 50 for it. And he says, nah, I can't take 50. So I didn't end up buying it. And then I remember later on, I don't know if I had checked prices on Arbor Presses or when I started looking more seriously for one and seeing how much they were going for, I remember thinking, I really wish I had bought that press. And what ended up happening was, so, you know, fast forward to now, this past Saturday, I go out there. I said, so what do you get? You know, we get to talk, and I said, well, so what are you going to get for the Arbor Press? So I tell you, I'd like to get 150 for it. And I chuckled and I said, you know, I'm thinking to myself, if he had put it on Craigslist for 150 with a picture, that's the other thing, no photos, so that really helped me, but didn't help him. I think if he had put it on a Craigslist for 150 bucks, somebody probably would have come along and given him 100 bucks for it. But I was there, and I had the cash in hand, and I reminded him that he actually offered it to me for 75, and I didn't buy it. And so he said, well, what do you want to give me for it? And I said, well, I had offered you 50. And so then we split the difference, and I got it for 60 bucks. So, guys, here's my Dake #1 Arbor Press. It's got the nice Dake, the early Dake label on it over here. There is a number up here. I can't quite see what it is, but that doesn't really matter because the side of the press tells you the whole story. Whoops, wrong side. This looks like the original handle too, which is nice. Sometimes these handles get broken or missing, or go missing. Here we go. This is also the plate. Oftentimes you'll find this plate has gone by the wayside. What happens is you can take this plate out real easy, and that's an original plate from what I can see. But my point is that, you know, sometimes somebody will take that plate out, it gets lost in the shuffle or whatever, or if it's bought out of a scrapyard, oftentimes the plate's already gone. This is a Dake Arbor Press #1. Now I don't know what #1 means. I don't know if that corresponds to 1 ton. I can look it up online, I'm sure, but all I know is it's a nice size. It's still heavy, son of a gun, and I'm going to need some help. I'm probably going to end up having to use the shop crane to lift it up onto a bench, but this is going to be really handy when I'm putting in bearings, and I don't want to sit there and pump away with that damn Harbor Freight hydraulic press. So I'm quite happy with that. I've only seen one press nicer than this one that I came close to buying, and that one was a bigger one. I think it was a #2 or a 2.5. That one, I think the guy wanted $250 for that. So I'm really happy with that for 60 bucks. And then while I was there, he let me look around, and I think I might actually be going back there because I'm in the process of. He had a cabinet there with a bunch of drawers in it that I really liked. I was already thinking of an idea to do something with that, maybe to put some of my larger drill bits and things like that in. And I didn't want to take it with me that day because I had a bunch of hardware in it, and he didn't want to empty it out. And I knew if I put it in my truck on its back, all that stuff would spill out and make a mess. So I might be going back to get that. But let me show you the other stuff I did pick up. So some of the items I looked at, and I looked at them initially and then I put them aside because he didn't want to give me a price on anything. He basically was waiting to see what I was going to say, and then he would let me know if I was out of line. So it was kind of a poker game we were playing there. So there was a bunch of hardware there, and one of the things that caught my eye was this is Shannon's taper pins. So these are, they've got some surface rust on them from being in the unheated garage. And there's all different sizes in here, and some of these little containers are near empty and some of them only have a few, and then some of them are pretty full. But the thing is, look at the prices on these, it's funny. 25 cents, 29 cents, 18 cents. This is pretty old. when I was working on the SIP drill press, I ended up having to go to the hardware store, and I went to the Midwest Fasteners aisle to buy a tapered pin. And if I recall, it cost me almost $2 for that one tapered pin. So I said to him, I said, you know, I said, this is more tapered pins than I'll probably need for quite a while. But I said, you know, if you're willing to take $10 for this, I'll take them, just so that I don't have to go back to a store ever again for a tapered pin. Although, you know, I don't know, maybe there's a size in here that is out that I would need. So I think I popped $10 on that. Yeah, actually I had to stop the video there and rethink things, because I know that I spent 165, and so I knew that something didn't add up here. So there's no way I paid. I think I paid $5. Yeah, I think I paid $5 for this box of tapered pins. And then I paid $5 for this adjustable spanner, because I remembered that I had this adjustable spanner that I used on the Wells Index, and I remembered it seemed a little bit small, but it worked. So when I saw this one, I was like, oh great, maybe that'll be the size I need. Of course, I didn't have this to compare it to in front of me. Once I got it home and looked at it here, I realized, oh, well, no. This is a 2-inch. This is a 4-inch. So apparently, there's a 3 in between, which is probably the perfect size for that bearing retainer nut, the spindle retaining nut on the Wells. But still, I got these for $5. I'm happy with that. Add that to the collection. Of course, the press I already mentioned. That I paid $60 for that, so there's the 5, so that leaves $100. I paid $5 for these, I said. That's $95. This Woodruff keys. Look at that, ton of them. It's funny. This one compartment here, they have surface rust on them. The rest of them are clean. But again, I said, this is more Woodruff keys than I'll need in my entire lifetime. But if I buy them cheap enough, I'm willing to buy them, because I know that if I have to go to the hardware store and buy a Woodruff key, what they're going to charge me for them. So I got this for $10. Pretty sure on that. So then, early on, I found this plastic bin here, and I was looking through it, and I noticed it had some of these standoff blocks, which are, you know, nice to have for the mill. And then I saw, look at this big hole down here. That's a big sucker. And that's pretty much, this whole box is just some hold down, some T-nuts, you know, and that's pretty much all that seems to be in here. So I kind of looked at that, and then I put it off to the side. Well, then later I found the cabinet down below, and I found this rack. And this is, it says TTC. This is probably a cheapo, you know, from somebody ordered from like Enco or MSC, and cheapo brand. And I said, geez, you know, I already got one of these. But I said, you know, it's always nice to have extras or whatever. So then I asked him. I'd already bought several other items, so I got him to give me all of this, because we were looking through and noticed that the names on these were different. These have holes in them, and these say Enco right on them. And then over on this side, they're the solid ones, but they're not marked with a name. And then there's some in here. So, make a long story short, $15. This set, I think, new is only $40 or $50 new, complete. This is missing some stuff, but we both agreed that probably what's in this box here, if I look through it, I could probably make this set complete. This has got all sawdust on it. Somebody must have been doing some woodworking in the vicinity.